Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Q&A for episodes or sessions 1 through 30 of Tales of Aneria.
They're kind of episodes.
Yeah, I mean,
sessions.
I just never know what to call them.
Yeah.
I'm joined by Scott, who is my brother and plays Bolt in the campaign. And this is just one of our episodes between when the campaign's starting back up again, and the reason why Scott gets to be the person across the table from me is because we live together, so there's no conceivable way that we don't already have sicknesses from each other.
Right. COVID.
Yeah. Yep. But we have collected your questions. Thank you so much for everything on the Discord that you posted, as well as the comments on the last video. Hopefully you're all excited as we are. We're going to go through the DM questions that were listed, and then some technical questions at the end here, and then we'll get to a player Q&A later down the line when everybody can get back together and we can gather a few more questions that are player specific. So
let's just jump right into it.
Sure.
We had a whole bunch of good questions. A lot from the Discord, which, by the way, if you're not part of, go ahead and click the link in the description and join. And we also had some from YouTube. So the first one that we're going to cover is G-Man on YouTube and Hawassa on Discord have both asked, I have a question for Corey. Could you go into a little more depth about the process of re-rolling character classes in the middle of a campaign? Now that it happened twice, I am very curious about what was the process leading up to it. Was it the same for both Dallin and Colby? How much was it about players wanting to play something else versus it being part of the lore?
Okay. So, yeah, there are very different situations that happened. The first one we'll cover was Dallin's changeover. And basically, in the last major campaign, the first campaign that Dallin ever played in, he played a wizard, like he did in this campaign. Mm-hmm. And he started playing the wizard again this campaign, and he realized he wanted to try something different. He wasn't really enjoying the character that he had created, and he came to me and he says, I know we're so many episodes into the campaign, but I feel like I need a change. How do we go about this? Do we just let Ezra go off on his own? But at that point, Ezra was kind of a really big part of the storyline because everything kind of revolved around the book and everything.
A lot of plot points in the first 10 episodes or so.
Yeah. So I talked with him and we came up with an idea. First of all, I asked him like what he wanted to do with the character, if he'd be okay playing it and changing it around. And since we had already been kind of on this chronergy path for him, I thought it'd be a really cool story moment where he just gets to be changed, full on timeline switch around and everything. And so we just kind of started flowing with that idea. I talked with him a lot about it, and we made sure that everything was put in place. And then I put my players into an encounter that they probably weren't supposed to win.
And then Colby. What was the difference between Colby's and Dallin's?
Colby's was an accident.
Colby's was controversial.
Yes, yeah, probably our most controversial episode
so far.
So what happened with Colby's is, and this is a lesson for every DM out there, if you're going to homebrew an item or you're going to have items that are not strictly D&D items in your game, make sure you test them on unlikely kobolds first, because sometimes they can be pretty dangerous and you don't realize what they do. And when that happened to Colby and he got disintegrated, or Ceradon got disintegrated, it was at a time in the story where the party really couldn't turn back. They were on this mission. If they turned around, it would be just a complete waste of time and effort, and they couldn't even find anybody that would be able to bring Ceradon back. And I wasn't ready to let Ceradon's story just fall by the wayside, because we're playing a D&D game, and people die in adventures all the time, and you have to pick up their remnants or whatever. But we're also playing a story campaign, and I didn't want to kill off anybody's favorite character just in a random encounter. In a spectacular way, that'd be great. But against some dirty pirates that happen to get a lucky shot off, no, that's not going to happen.
Well, so I'm going to answer from like a player standpoint, going back to, first of all, Ezra changing over from wizard to a fighter. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you create a character, you have an idea in your head, and you really like this character until you actually start playing them in the game, and then sometimes it just doesn't work out. It's maybe not your play style. Maybe there's some skills and abilities and stuff that you just really doesn't click with you, don't like. Maybe you just get, sometimes you just get bored. It happens. It's the same reason why people re-roll in RPG games and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially if you end up making a character that doesn't mesh well with a group, right? Or is like very dark and broody and that's all you play them as, and you don't really have a character in mind beyond that. It can get rather boring.
Yeah. And then as far as the Colby thing, I personally thought it was a pretty good way to bring it in because, like you said, there was not a lot of places for us. It wasn't like there was a temple nearby that we could take the body to or
ashes.
Take the ashes to and be like, hey, bring our friend back,
Yeah.
And I don't think, as a viewer, I know I wouldn't want to watch an episode where something really cool happened and the player dies or whatever, and then the next 2 episodes are the journey to get them resurrected that doesn't really do much. And then we have to decide, does Colby come back in those 2 episodes as some other random character, plays a small NPC role, or does he just sit there and do nothing?
Or do we tell one of our players that they can't play for 2 weeks while we're trying to resurrect them?
So anyway, and so I think that was a pretty good answer. The last part was just how much of it was players wanting to play something else versus being part of the lore, and I think we answered both those questions.
Basically, one was player wanted to play something else, and the other was complete lore. But I don't think that Colby, being our resident character creator, really minded being able to stretch his wings and play a different one of his builds that he's made over the years.
Yeah. So our next question is vernontwinkie on YouTube. Or vernontwinkie, whichever.
Who knows?
How much of your lore is added at the table? I'm building mine out, but definitely want to do collaborative storytelling. Same question for PC backstories. How much do you get to add as a DM as the story progresses?
So I think a good rule of thumb as a dungeon master is don't plan. You don't have to plan for everything. That's a ruler thumb. That's a thumb ruler. You don't want to plan for everything and come up with all the backstory, because if you come up with 10 different cities that are all really well thought out and detailed, you're going to want your players to go to all those cities, and then they're going to be hopping around the world and not really getting to know anything. And trust me when I say that about 10% is all your players will really invest in the lore of your world. The rest of it's background stuff until it becomes the actual plot. I know that personally, where I created a whole World Anvil site, which you can still check out below, for Aneria, and showed it off to my players, and I maybe got about, a few people went to a few specific areas. Not that I'm blaming them or anything like that. Everybody's got lives, everybody's got jobs. They don't have time to sit there and read through every single article that I made.
And there is a lot of lore there. If you haven't checked it out and you have some time, feel free. Links in the description. As
far as during the game, I love adding lore during the game. Typically, I like to add little background details, like adding in a song choice or a new deity or something like that. Or I think one time Preston started talking about he was making a joke about Yoda, but he started talking about a goblin that rode on people's backs. Mm-hmm. And we turned it into kind of this fun little folk tale that the 8 rings. And he probably doesn't even remember it, but I do. And and it gets added into the bank for little things to come out later. And then as far as player backstory, I typically try to create the story beats for my player's backstory, and we'll get into a little bit about how that goes later. Yeah. I know there's
thankfully, our group is actually pretty good at backstory. I think most of us have given you a multiple page backstory of this is what our character, where they came from, what they've been doing up to this point, etc.
Yeah.
And not everyone does that, and that's fine if you don't. But I think you have it a little bit easier than some DMs that might struggle with this because of that. Mm-hmm. Because we do give you next, and it gives you a lot of the different little threads to pull while you're going through the game. So
yep. And then sometimes I just have a concept that comes up in my head during the game, and I'll just tie it on to a backstory and create a new little fun character and a new little fun hiccup. And it really just comes down to, I'd say, as if we want to talk percentages, it's probably about 70% pre-written and then 30% added in the game.
Yep.
Thank you, Vernont or Vernon.
Vernontwinkie.
I think it's Vernon. It has to.
Vernontwinkie.
Yeah.
Disdainful on Discord. How long do you see this campaign going for?
Hopefully until everybody dies. No, when I originally pitched, yeah, and your front. When I originally pitched the idea to everybody, I said that I wanted to do a full level 1 to 20 campaign. I want this to, and then maybe even a bit beyond, because you're not just going to get to level 20 and be like, okay, well, you guys are done. Good job. You hit level 20 and now you don't get to play with all the cool toys that you got at level 20.
I think the farthest that we've gone with this group in the past was 14. Is as far as we've gone.
13 or 14 was... Yeah.
So the idea of playing a full 1 to 20 campaign, I think, was really appealing for all of us.
And I hope that we get to showcase a part of D&D that doesn't, 5th edition, that doesn't get showcased often. And that's the end game, because typically most campaigns end around level 12 to 13. So it'd be nice to be able to show off like what the higher levels are like and what type of creatures you might be able to get into and face. And I know that a personal challenge of mine heading into the tail end of the campaign is going to be coming up with monsters that are actually a threat. And I'm going to have to like do some even more major homebrewing on monsters than I typically do.
Good one. Lord Trivanus on YouTube. How do you deal with massive combats? Maybe you can give us some tips and tricks.
Mostly it's panic. I just panic until it handles itself. No, so there, I need to probably do like a dedicated video sometime where I talk about a few like of my personal tips on that, because there's a lot that I do that kind of just like makes massive combat easier. Sometimes I like to make the armies clashing around the players and do sort of a like roll off to see which side is gaining favor and how that affects the battlefield. And then the players take on an elite force within that. If you've seen the Battle of the Bloody Fountain, you saw that I did that's probably one of my biggest combat with the most monsters that I've ever had in it. And that was done, and the tip that I use there really easily is most of them were 1 or 2 hit wonders, and I just marked off, and it wasn't okay, this one's got 13 HP and he took 7 damage, so he has 6. This one took 5 damage, so he's got 8 or whatever. It was, these guys have 2 hits and then they're gone, or 1 hit and then they're gone.
One thing you've done in the past, which I think is good advice for other DMs out there, is if you're going to have a large combat and you have many different people, don't be the only one that plays those NPCs. Divvy up the NPCs out, and you've done this in the past too, where you're like, hey, you play these 2 guards, you play these 2 guards, you play these, that kind of thing. Because otherwise, the DM just goes through and basically does the combat either in their head or on their own, and it's a lot of downtime for the players. So try to either break it up so the rest of your players are commanding a squadron, or they're controlling, a couple different people on top of their actual PC, or like you said, maybe they're just background. They're just background noise, and sometimes they might get in the way or whatever. So
and then I also have run full on like large scale army combats, and the way that I've done that is had the players use skill checks in order to lead their portion of the army, and then done more of like a pulled back massive like troop movement scale thing, and that was pretty fun. It needs a lot of refinement. The couple times that I did it, I could see a lot of like chinks in the armor that definitely needed to be fixed up. But I need to maybe sometime I'll do a dedicated video talking about how best to group them together and everything. Because I know one other tip is if you have a bunch of people that are ranged, have them all shoot at the same time and just do so many attacks on each person, or even have an entire battalion contribute to the total attack roll and damage bonus of a single attack, in order to make it easier for people to be like, okay, yeah, I get hit, or I managed to avoid this volley or something like that.
Yeah, good tips. If you have any more questions or you want any more clarification, put those below and we'll gather them up for the next Q&A session. Zygon, Mage of Duality on Discord.
Ooh, what a name. I love it.
Says, Corey, what sort of inspiration did you draw from when creating an area, and what world building tips would you give to first time DMs?
So, inspiration, a lot of it came from, well, I've been playing in fantasy worlds in my head for a long time. Just like random things that I've written down, things on TV or other games that inspire me. There's a lot of inspiration that comes from video games. And specifically, if you've seen any of my like big boss combats, you'll see like little boss game mechanics in there that make you go like, oh, I've seen that in, Zelda, or I've seen that in World of Warcraft raid boss or something like that. As far as like aesthetic inspiration, I tend to try and shy away from like any sort of typical norms, and I use those to establish like my own tropes, right? Like if elves are usually very elegant, sometimes I might make them very greedy, or the dwarves being like mountain folk. I kind of wanted to do more of like they are the people who go out in the world and they hunt down aberrant creatures and demons and whatnot in an area kind of thing. So it's kind of a combination of, oh, that looks really cool, how can I adapt it? And that looks very tropey, how can I subvert it? And then as far as tips and tricks, start small. That's the easiest tip and trick is pick a single kingdom, decide what traits that kingdom really values, like give them like 2 or 3 traits. Obviously, you don't want to end up with a city being everybody in it is a warmonger, or everybody in it is out for themselves and greedy, which they can make great little like port towns and everything for like a bandit town or a tribe of orcs or something. But the one thing that I always would say is think about like what in your world is, or what in this kingdom makes it unique, and what makes it kind of diverse in the people in it, right? Give them core values and then kind of expand from there.
Why don't we talk a little bit about how we've physically made the map of an area and the shape of an area.
Yeah, thank you for, you're the one who really took the time on that. And we'll actually, maybe we'll post the image right up here.
Yeah, there's also an interactive map down in the World Anvil site. Yep. So in the past, Corey found was it a guide or something?
Yeah, it's sort of like a guide or just like somebody's own personal preference.
You lay out a piece of either, grid paper or poster board or something like that, and you take a giant handful of dice and you just drop them and let them just scatter all over the place. And then what we usually do is we just take a pencil and we just kind of scribble around the edge border and kind of make the general shape of the continent or the world or the plane or whatever we're doing. Or continents. And then each dice has a specific tag to it. D20s will be cities.
Yep.
And the number they land on is how large the city is.
Yeah, so like a 20 is a huge capital, a 1 is maybe it's just a village, or it's just a burgeoning town. There's like 6s are like forests and things like that. It's a really cool system to make a randomized map. It's not the only way to make a map.
No, but it's a quick and dirty way, and it actually turns out pretty well most of the time. So.
And then of course you're never confined to that if you don't want to be. I know that when I decided on Aneria, one of the themes that I wanted to go for, and actually shout out to We Are Legion, We Are Bob, the Bobaverse books. I was listening to the 3rd book when I came up with the idea for the rivers, the Great Rivers, because was it the 4th one?
4th book, Heaven's River.
Yep. Yeah, I thought it was the 3rd. Anyway, so I came up with the idea of the Great Rivers, and I had already written it down when I came to Scott and said, hey, help me with this map. And so as we built it, I said, okay, but a river needs to run like this and like this and like this. So that kind of made a judgment call and shifted a few things around. And it also developed a few things, like the beacon actually was designed to be in the center because it kind of fell in the center. So, yeah.
We got another couple questions from Disdainful on YouTube this time. I don't know if it's the same person from Discord, maybe.
Ooh, they need to fight out for the name.
Yeah, combat to the death for who gets the rights to the name Disdainful. Yep. How many encounters do you have planned for a session versus how many do you improvise?
I never plan more than the session ahead in detail. I have big broad strokes of where I want the story to go for each character and where I want the story to go for the full campaign. But I never plan the session until I know what my players are going to do basically in a session.
And that was his second question. What are your goals or goal going into for creating a campaign/session?
The goal for creating a single session is kind of your standard authors, or not authors, but like writers, TV show. Like, what's the big plot point? What's the big action scene? What happens? What kind of character interactions can you have?
Have fun.
Yeah.
Primary goal number one.
Yeah.
At the top. Have fun.
Yeah.
Right?
If you're not having fun,
yeah,
then like don't stress about it.
Having a couple improvised encounters or some pre-planned random encounters set aside just in case, that could just be thrown in wherever.
Yep.
It's always a good thing to have when you're DMing. I know I've always kept a few in the back pocket just in case, for when the players get to a location and they might veer off in a way that has nothing to do with the plot that we sent them on. So it's always nice to have something a little available, but you don't always have to have everything planned out. But if you don't plan anything, make sure you're really good at improving, throwing monsters in and being able to adjust, CR ratings and adding minions or taking them away.
And obviously, don't be afraid to just say, "Hey guys, can I take 5 minutes to
10 minutes, 15 minutes
to come up with this combat?" Because I wasn't expecting this. But yeah, I would say again, going off percentages, I would say it's probably an even 50-50 split for how much I have planned versus how much is improvised in a session. Because there's plenty of things where in the moment I'll just add a detail, and as I'm adding the detail, I get that thought in my head of, oh no, somebody's going to latch onto this. And sure enough, they go and they check out the plague tent instead of moving on to the actual big story, be it like they're supposed to.
So that actually, the next question is by StudyNot on Discord. They ask, how much of the current campaign do you have planned already for Tales versus are you planning out only 1 or 2 sessions ahead? Because players, all of them everywhere, are infamous for taking unplanned directions. You kind of answered that a little bit, that you try not to have too much planned, but you have kind of a big overarching story for this, I don't know what you call it, chapter arc or story
basically,
arc.
I do like to tend to put them into 4 or 5 session story arcs, and as I'm kind of planning a story arc out, I will detail certain things that happen, certain story beats that I want to meet, and then as the players progress through the story, if they start veering off, I either redirect those story beats or I cut them entirely and put a new thing in. Because I'm not a railroader DM. I like to encourage my players to go certain directions, but if they end up going somewhere completely that I wasn't expected, to me it's just a challenge of like, okay, where can I take this that they'll enjoy?
Yeah. So StudyNot on Discord also asks, it seems like players are having an impact on the background lore. Preston with the wings/rings, or Vings, if you want to just cover both those. Knife dancing. Tori with the masochists, while others are more reactive, making rolls/checks to see what they know and don't know of their related lore, like Bolt's missing history and Colby, I'm assuming that's what I meant, Colby, with the court/Dwarven clan stuff. So the question is, do you solicit your players to create background and lore for your world or game? Are these examples of Preston and Tori seemingly deeper tie-ins to the setting volunteered by them, and you work them into the game/background as cool ideas and ways to help your players play that they are looking to play?
So that's a really good question. When I first came up with the setting and kind of was getting everything settled, I told my players to come up with their character, and I also wanted them to come up with a piece of the world specifically. And some people came up with simple concepts. Dallin came up with Willow Creek Hollow, just kind of like it's a town that has a mage academy that is feeding the Arcanum recruits, basically. And Tori came up with the idea for masochists in her hometown, and kind of the idea behind what masochists are and why they're hiding. You didn't really come up with much because you wanted to do a more amnesiac storyline.
I wanted to play this character as kind of a broad, just really broad character, broad background. Like here's some really basic stuff, like woke up X amount of years ago, has kind of just been traveling the world, doesn't really know what happened to them, where they came from, etc. And so I kind of left that ball in your court to
not to mention
flesh that out.
With helping develop the map, you were also helping me develop a lot of the town names and kind of concepts. So because I'm always bouncing ideas.
Here's a little peek behind the curtain.
That curtain?
No, it's just the metaphorical curtain.
Metaphor.
Since Corey and I actually we live in the same house, and we actually spend a lot of time talking about concepts for the game, for other games that we might be working on, and so I have to be really good at separating player knowledge and character knowledge, and not bringing up things that could spoil stuff. I know a lot of secrets about Aneria, and Corey still throws in stuff that you still throw.
Yeah,
in
I try not to. I try not to tell you everything, because otherwise it wouldn't be fun for you.
But
you also do all of the miniature work.
I print all the minis, including the bad guys,
and you help me with the terrain and everything. So it's very hard for me to tell you what monsters I need, and not kind of tell you.
Not unless you gave me a list of it. There's the 10 I need, and then I do them all, and then you.
But I'd say about 99% of the time you're really good about keeping that to yourself and not letting it affect your judgment or what happens. Every now and then you'll let something slip, and I'll turn to you and I'll be like, they don't know that yet. And we'll have to be like, oh no, okay, here we go.
Cut that.
Yeah.
Cut it.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. And then, so going back to the actual question here, Preston came to me and he said he wanted to come up with a concept that was with the 8 rings, and he kind of pitched me the idea, and I said, okay, let's see what you can come up with. And he ended up coming back with about 8 to 10 pages of lore and kind of ideas, and it was a very like a scattershot, like, here's a bunch of stuff that I think we could use, and then from there we've been basically working on it together every time something comes up, which is why oftentimes I'll be like, oh, Preston, what is the deal with this ring, or we'll talk about it beforehand. But I would say that as far as whether it's better to make people roll and tell them the knowledge or have them come up with it, I really like the idea of having somebody say like, oh, have I ever heard of this race before? Well, roll for it. They roll for it and they have, oh yeah, tell me a couple facts about them, and then let the players kind of create the world with you, because they're going to be more invested in that world when they have the opportunity to make a part of it.
And as a player, as long as you're not making campaign breaking lore, like, oh yeah, I've heard about this, this beast came and ravaged this city multiple times, as long as you're not doing stuff like that, and you're just doing a little bit of things like, oh, I've once heard of a legend of a werewolf that did XYZ in some faraway land. Yeah, that's okay, because then you can go ahead and work that into the story
but now I don't have to like redesign my kingdom to be
there's a giant scar from when a dragon came through and destroyed it all.
Yeah, not that I wouldn't, but it's if you're going to allow your players to do that, make sure that they know that these are minor facts about the lore. If there's something big that you need to make sure stays there, you always have the power to override.
Formidable and Caleb Bourne, same person on Discord and YouTube.
I'm assuming they're the same person because it was the exact same question.
Yeah, it could be two people thinking alike.
Exact same wording too.
Aside from what we've seen, what books have you been using for rules/item reference mostly?
Okay. So we always talk about the Griffin Saddlebag. It's a great book, and the Tome of Beasts, Volume 1 and 2 from Cobalt Press, which I go to often, if not just for inspiration, then outright grabbing a monster.
For unique monsters.
Or an item. I've been using the Vault of Magic a little bit. There's a lot of different... so you get a lot of miniatures through Patreon, and a lot of them are starting to create lore around their individual miniatures as well, stat blocks. And I've been like pulling a little bit of that just as it's been tickling.
We've talked about the Skies of Sordain. They have there was a whole campaign on Kickstarter that came with miniatures to print, a whole book, rule books. Spells, weapons, etc.
Arcanum, or no, the pirate skyship that you guys saw in the episode, that's one of the Skies of Sordain. The gun that killed Ceradon was from that campaign as well. I like to look at a lot of homebrew settings but I don't like to rely on them exclusively, just because I do like the idea of making my own world and making it unique. So, and then of course I am always looking at, actually, this is a really good point. I'm a big fan of lit RPG books and dungeon core books on Amazon. You can find them under those genres. They're kind of a similar genre, but one's like a dungeon core is like a subsection of lit RPG. And there's a lot of concepts in there that I have adapted and used in my games as well. The Hollowbend Sanctum itself was kind of my attempt at what if there was a dungeon core style thing in Aneria, but not strictly dungeon core, kind of thing. Yeah.
Max R on YouTube asks, how did you and the players structure session 0 or prep? Did you talk about party balance, or did everyone come in with a character and then just deal with it?
So first of all, there is a session 0. It is over on the D&D Optimized channel, or the D4 network channel. Mm-hmm. So if you want to check it out there's a partner channel link to ours. If you're coming in here and you don't know Colby's channel, that is. But there is a session 0 on there. I don't think that one is closed off, so you can listen to...
it's still open.
Yeah, you can listen to our concepts there. As far as what I told the players is, don't worry about coming up with a party dynamic. Mm-hmm. And you guys talked it through and decided who was going to be what, and kind of settled on roles.
We decided Dallin and I had traveled a little bit together. Tori's character and Colby's character were together, and Victor's character was kind of like just the loner that was just there. And then Corey ended up putting us all into a situation together.
Yeah, but the classes weren't like, I'm going to be the healer or anything like that. There is no strict healer in the Wayward Watch. Yeah. Tori is the closest thing you guys have, and she just kind of like throws out a little bit of healing now and then.
Yeah, anytime we do that, whether it's a one-shot, primary campaign, side campaign, etc., we kind of all just get on a chat together and just brainstorm, here's the kind of classes that I would like to play. This, or this.
Yeah.
And if someone else goes, well, I really want to play your number one choice as well, then we hash out who gets to do that, or who should do that.
Yep.
Sometimes we both do it, depending on what's going on.
And sometimes you just end up with the same archetype, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter too much, but talking and communicating with the players is definitely like watching them communicate with each other. They're pretty good about making sure that they kind of manage that on their own.
Yeah. I think we do tend to make sure that we have at least some healing, just because it does make it a little bit more convenient while in the campaign, while playing in the world, or out doing stuff. So.
Yeah.
Study Not on Discord, another one, says, how often do you feel like you need to homebrew monsters for your game, and why? Is there not enough options of the kind you want, or do you want to surprise rule-savvy players?
This is a great question. And the answer is I love homebrewing monsters just because I love coming up with new monsters. I think there's a big issue in 5th edition where, and it happened in other editions too, where an orc is only threatening for so long. Mm-hmm. And 5th edition tried to make it a little bit easier by like reducing the HP and how like the maximum bonuses that you can get in specific areas. But eventually an orc with a +4 to hit is not going to be able to stand up. And then there's cool like orc encounters that would be wasted. Or if I wanted to have a whole campaign of goblinoids, then you guys are just getting bored by episode 5. So coming up with homebrew concepts of this is an elite orc, or this is a demon blood infused orc, or something like that, allows me the flexibility to kind of either take a template from another monster and just turn it into an orc, or to create my own and give the players something new. I don't think that I have any players that really are very much like, oh, I know what a beholder does for sure, so I know how to fight it, and it's no challenge for me. But would I change a beholder around just because I felt like it? Yeah, probably, just because it'd be a lot of fun.
Good. Derek PB on YouTube, I assume that's Derek Peanut Butter. Well, Mr. Peanut Butter says...
Mr. Peanut Butter was my father.
Evening all. I, like many have, enjoyed not only Tales of Aneria on the new channel, but many of the D4 network and pre-network as well. You are all doing some great unique content, not only the DM discussion that you all partake in, but the game world aspects you fold in, player interactions, NPC, etc.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. His question is, Corey, in Tales of Aneria, how much is on the fly versus pre-made with the sideways jaunts that can happen? So if I'm assuming he means if we go off on a random tangent, how much of that is something you've already prepped at some point and is just maybe socking away, or how much of it is just kind of pull it out of your brain?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that earlier, but one thing that we can discuss here is when I am prepping a game, I like to think, what could my players do? Right? Like, what crazy shenanigans could they throw at me? It doesn't always work. Every now and then one of my players surprises me and completely flabbergasts me for probably a couple minutes. But there are plenty of times where I've anticipated that somebody might think that this helpful person is evil and try to go off on that tangent. And to be honest, it's probably mostly just planned for as far as like broad strokes go, and then if something comes up, I just like to wing it.
They also say, "Give my best to Hug."
Oh, Hug thanks you.
Title Torrent on Discord asks, "What was the inspiration behind the Epic Dice system?"
You were, Scott.
A little bit, yeah.
So we discovered a system from another DM online.
DM Scotty from the DM's Guild. I think that's what they call it. It's
the DM's Guild is the big, like, that's the big where you buy books and stuff. So I don't know if that's.
Oh well, sorry. It was on the DM's Guild.
It was on the DM's Guild. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But he came up with a system called the Luck system.
Luck dice.
And they were originally luck dice, and it was basically. It was similar where you could use the dice in any situation, but it was whenever you failed the check, you got a luck dice, and then and then you could spend those later on in order to succeed. Sort of a karmic balance to keep certain players who don't roll very well from just feeling like they were doing nothing the entire night. We tried it out during the last Strahd game. We tried that out just as a test capacity, and it was okay, but my players weren't as impressed with it. They thought it made things a little too easy. And so what I decided to do, and I've always done when I've been impressed or thought a joke was really funny, or somebody did something like tracked initiative back in the day, I'd always say, oh, give yourself a +1 on your next roll.
Yeah, or advantage on your next attack or something like that.
And that became really hard to track most of the time. Most of the time people forgot about it, or it would end up being an inconsequential perception check. And so that's where these came in. The beautiful dice that Scott bought in bulk, and it's just
an excuse to buy more dice.
Of course. And I decided that the Epic die would be the extra inspiration on top of it. That would give my players a little bit of an edge if they needed it, or a little bit of a saving grace.
Yep.
Most of the time they just use it for damage rolls, though.
Well, yeah. The best defense is a strong offense, right? Tim Parsons on YouTube, in session 23, while the group is debating whether to take Tobin's offer, what's going through your head? Do you have a preferred outcome, and one or more backup plans in case things go haywire in RP moments like this? How hard do you lean on Deus Ex Machina to drive the team's decision one way or the other? In moments like that, are you worried they're going to simply choose to fight their way out, and would you let them if they did? You seem to be really good at directing that sort of chaos energy on the fly, often through the actions of major player NPCs. Whatever it is, hats off to you for making it look easy.
Thank you. It's not easy. It's a constant panic inside my head during the session when something like this happens.
It's 15 years of DM experience.
Yeah.
And,
so I don't like relying on ex machinas. I think that it kind of makes things a little cheap if something comes in and swoops in the last moment to save the day, or something forces the players to do something. My players always have the right to run away from a fight. They always have the right to choose to fight when they shouldn't, and deal with the consequences later. As far as the Tobin one goes, I had this session planned out to get them to Tobin, which was why he was surrounded by quite a lot of guards and ogres and stuff, and they could have chose to fight, and they may have come out on top on that.
We almost did. There were a few moments where we kind of all did the whole look at each other like, are we doing this? Are we gonna try this? And then I think you showed his relative strength.
Yeah.
Because didn't he dispatch someone quickly or something?
Yeah, he killed off that changeling.
That's right.
He had one of his guards just kill off the changeling immediately.
Yeah.
And that was more of a, like, this person's inconsequential, I don't need them anymore. But what I had planned from the beginning for that encounter was to get them down to talk to Tobin to get to the next quest line. And once they were alone, then it was their choice whether or not they wanted to attack Tobin. That the plan was always prepared for both scenarios. I did want to show off that this was a dangerous being, and revealing him as the Rakshasa kind of, I hoped, put a little bit of fear into people, not as much as they thought he was fuzzy, but and
He was, by the way.
Yeah, very fuzzy. But it's one of those things where you try your best to just like lay out the story as is, and then you just plan for everything to catch on fire. And then once it does, you'll just be like, well, I've got the extinguisher prepared, so we're good to go,
So, we've had many people ask, including both players at the table and commenters, where are the dragons? Why aren't there dragons? What's the deal with the dragons? Give the dragons back.
Okay.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, all right. I will tell you what the deal is with the dragons on the very next episode of Tales of Aneria. Literally, session 31, I do reveal, at least in part, what happened to the dragons. There's a little bit more to it, but we get the general idea of why there are no dragons in Aneria.
And that's all we're going to say.
Yep.
So you have to watch that.
Yep. And then, actually, Scott, there's some technical questions down at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Just kind of about our process and everything that we can talk to each other about to kind of round out the episodes, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Sound good? If you don't mind, I'll take these and start talking to you about them, unless there's something that...
No, go ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd be happy to ask him to the best of my ability.
Yeah. So Tim Parsons on YouTube says, as a theater tech guy, it's always fun to see what's going on backstage and before curtain. So a behind the scenes tour of what it takes to prep for a session might be fun. A tour of Corey's resource room, wandering into Scott's bottle making shop, how the tabletop and the area around the table are set up, to have all the props and accessories handy, a quick walkthrough of everyone's dice, as you all seem to have loads. He has so many dice. So do you want to do like a behind the scenes episode sometime?
I actually would love to do that. I would love to show everyone exactly how the Red Room is set up, what we have done to make it easier to play in, to make it sound good, have decent video quality, etc. And as far as like a tour for the model making stuff and the resource room, things like that, let's do some cleaning. Then we can get into it.
It does tend to get messy for sure.
We're very much kind of cramped into a smaller house, and trying to get everything. We have so much stuff, trying to fit everything in here can be a little problematic at times, and perhaps we'll even kind of show some of our solutions for mini storage and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I can even do a kind of maybe a walkthrough. Maybe not like every dice, but like some of my favorite dice, and show my.
I think
my
you
big
need to show off
collection
your collection. Yeah,
of
for
dice.
sure. Maybe we'll post a big community with a picture of all of them together.
We do that.
Okay, cool. Rob Vera on YouTube says, "Hey Corey, hi. After having finished seeing Colby finish his one-shot with the Dungeon Dudes and Treant Monk, I was wondering what your stance on guestings, I'm guessing you mean guests, on the campaign are, like a side quest adventure and having someone outside of the main group come in to and experience your DMing, like Chris Munty or Kelly. I do like the idea of bringing in guest stars. I think it's more of a difficult prospect with all of us being physical players and having one person come in online. We've done that before, where one of our players had to come in remote every week, and it makes the game a lot harder for that person to actually engage with and feel like they're a part of the story, and everybody to kind of like listen in and make sure that there's no technical issues. I would love to do a side quest. If I was going to do that, I probably would do a full side quest with a bunch of guest stars. Maybe even do like a Discord group where I grab a couple lucky people from Discord and run an Aneria session on Roll20 with them. I think that would be pretty cool as well. Obviously, that we're very early into the channel and very early into the campaign at this point, so I don't want to do too much of a shakeup. But eventually, I mean, I'd love to get whoever wanted to guest star. You know?
Yeah. And if you haven't already, check out the Bronze Battalion one shot we did. That was actually kind of a continuation of a longer campaign where both Dallin and Preston flip-flopped back and forth. They each DM'd a few sessions and then would swap for a different story arc, and they kept doing that back and forth.
We still need to do Tori DMing an episode. I want to see you DM.
I have lots of plans and machinations.
Okay.
But I need a lot more time to print more figures, paint more stuff, create more things, write more lore, etc., etc.
And we need to try and get Colby to DM and have him optimize monster encounters against us. Like, see how that goes.
Have him have optimized monsters versus our unoptimized characters.
Yeah. And then let's see. I guess just one last question here.
Looks like it.
Any plans of any kind or on any kind of source book for the public? Tentative, yes. We definitely want to, and of course, the more that we can build the community, the easier it becomes to say, yes, we want to dedicate time to this and put up the Kickstarter, because something like that would have to go through Kickstarter, or it would have to be something that we do long term in our own time, and then eventually post on something like DM's Guild.
I don't know if you're on the Discord, you may have seen a little bit. Preston has some really good art that he's done. We would love to be able to hire either Preston or a group of artists to illustrate a book, illustrate a campaign setting for us, backgrounds, characters, NPCs, etc., weapons. We do have a lot of lore and stuff that we would love to be able to throw into a book and hand out. But a lot of that just boils down to time and cost. And right now we're still in the newborn stage of everything, and so a lot of it's getting written down and rough drafted and saved, but we don't have any concrete plans at the moment on when we're going to release that or how much is going to be in that kind of a thing.
In the meantime, I'll once again point it out because it needs to be pointed out. There is a link to the World Anvil site where you can go, and it's sort of a wiki for an area that I've made that allows you to kind of explore the world a little bit, get a little bit of lore behind it. I have not updated it since, I think, episode 4, but...
time to get on that.
Yeah, time to get on that.
Maybe you could leave a comment if you want him to continue updating, if you see anything missing.
Were there any other comment or any other questions that you wanted to go over? I think we got most of them.
I think we got most of them. We are saving some for our player questions. We would like some more. If you have more questions that are player specific, even more DM questions is fine as well. We'd like to gather them up, and maybe in another 15-ish, 20 episodes, something like that, we can do another Q&A session.
And
perhaps
then
with the whole group.
We actually just had our session 31 recording last night. So the party is fresh off of the big reveals that I had planned, and the big like climactic moment for the Temple of the Eternal Gale. And we're going to be posting that next week. So you'll be able to be on the lookout for that in the meantime. And I think again, what it comes down to for Q&A episodes behind the scene is time and your support. So if you can, comment, like, subscribe, join the Discord.
If you would like some of our merch, check out the link in the description. We've got shirts, hats, beanies, mugs, hoodies apparently are super comfortable. We've had a couple people buy them and send us some pictures. We'd love to see...
Which, by the way, you look great in those pictures.
Yeah, I'm beautiful.
Our merch looks good on you.
And if you buy anything, please send us a picture supporting our merch. We love it.
But thanks so much, guys. Hope you have a wonderful night. Hopefully this was a little bit enlightening. I'm happy to answer some questions if you have them in the comments as well. I'll probably keep an eye on that for a little bit. Or if you want to join our Discord, I'm always kind of around looking and answering any questions that come up. So, but thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.